Well, Prof, if I could bring this in, I mean, we, as you always say, the youths are the leaders of tomorrow. What is the impression? What kind of impression do you get about young people's approach to fighting corruption?
You know, there was a time when I believed, naively of course, that the next generation is a generation that will be slightly better than our generation. But I'm quite clear in my mind that holding all factors constant, the younger generation is, in my view, even more dangerous to Africa.
Oh dear.
Because they have learned from the older generation. Remember the age-old saying that when mother cow is chewing cud, baby cow, namely the calf, is watching very keenly. The next generation of Africans is waiting for the opportunity to be thieves. And a recent survey in Kenya demonstrated that over 40% of young people think that there is nothing wrong with corruption. The only thing that they think is wrong is to be arrested, and that the only thing that you must do is to avoid being arrested. And I'm quite certain that if a survey were to be conducted in Nigeria, many young Nigerians would love to be in the opportunity, in the situation where they can steal. So that people condemn corruption sometimes not because they hate it, but because they themselves don't have the opportunity to be corrupt. It is not going to be easy, and going forward we must go back to the basics and ask ourselves as Africans what it is that we must do. And I think what we must do is to create a new African. An African who has integrity, an African who believes that there is honesty, and that can only be done if we punish the corrupt. Impunity is one of the problems. There is the story of one infamous Nigerian called James Ibori, who is now serving term in Nigeria, or rather in the United Kingdom. He could not be jailed here in Nigeria, and he is now jailed in the United Kingdom. In our own country, we have cases where people have been convicted and their money confiscated in the United Kingdom, but in our own country nothing is happening. In other words, there is a sense in which we in Africa condone and encourage thieves. And in any event, in many African countries, most of those who are elected into public office are thieves. And once you elect thieves into public office, then you can rest assured that nothing will happen when they occupy public office.
You're talking about rebirth here for Africa, because that seemed as if we have to go back to the basics. Once upon a time, people don't have thieves within the hamlets, communities, villages, and those who steal are ostracized. But today, I think it seemed that those who pilfer the nation's wealth are extolled and taken to some other good places. How can these new breed of Africans be grown, since now they're watching the mother cow chew its cord?
You know, one of the things that we must ask ourselves as Africans is, what do we do with our education system? Is something wrong with our education system? Is something wrong with our value system? And we must go back to the basics. I remember a country, then a little country like Hong Kong, had a major problem with corruption. A decision was made by the political leadership that we had to clean up the system. And cleaning up the system meant looking at the electoral process. It meant looking at the education system. It meant looking at all the values of the society and re-engineering those. And once you're engineering those, then you create an environment where a new Nigerian who is honest and votary of integrity will emerge. A new Ghanaian, a new Kenyan, a new Zambian. It must be a question of going back to the basics, because in our societies, we still respect people who work hard. If today, for example, somebody was a goat thief in rural Nigeria, he or she would not be respected. But the thief who is stealing billions from the Federal Reserve in Abuja is respected. In other words, if we steal money from national government, that is not condemned. But if we steal somebody's goat, we condemn that. We must in the nature of things, make sure that the things of the 21st century and the things that we relate with our traditional lives are equated, and that a thief is a thief irrespective of what he or she steals.
How does the media come in here?
The media sometimes is complicit. There is a sense in which African media sometimes celebrates thieves. Sometimes it's deliberately, sometimes it is unwittingly. My own view is that the media has a duty to give the oxygen of publicity to men and women who say the right things. A program such as this is a useful program because it gives me the opportunity to highlight some of the things that I think are critical in the fight against corruption. But the tragedy in many African countries is that these thieves own the media, some of them. And when they own the media, they set the agenda. So the question is, how do we ensure that the media enjoys sufficient freedom so that they are not engaged in self-censorship? I'm very happy. In the last few days that I've been in Nigeria, I have seen the media is vibrant. The media is bringing out some of the things that are at the very heart of the Nigerian nation. And I believe going forward, whether it is the print media or the electronic media, they must be used to good effect to ensure that those who engage in activities that are inimical to the country are exposed and remain exposed. The only thing is that the shelf life of exposure sometimes is too short. We mention about the thief for one day and they know that our memories are short and selective, and then we forget about it. And the next thing you hear is that they have received a national honor,
Professor,
or that they are chiefs.
Can you tell us about your experience with the law? I mean, you have talked about how impunity must be stopped and those who are found to be corrupt must be brought to justice. But how easy is that in Africa from your experience?
Not very easy, because there was a time when I believed that the judiciary would be the last bastion in the fight against corruption. But the corrupt have a way of ensuring that they corrupt the entire system. I remember at one time when I was the director of the Anti-Corruption Authority, one government minister told me, "Take me to court, you are wasting my time, and in any event I'm going to corrupt the judges." I do not know whether he did, but he was acquitted. And you can then rest assured that when you have a judiciary which in itself has been compromised, then the fight against corruption does not become as easy as it should. It is therefore critical that all arms of the government must be reading from the same page. I've said this controversially at one time, that in the fight against corruption there must be a conspiracy of institutions. The judiciary should read from the same page as all institutions that are involved in investigation and prosecution, and they must look at corruption a lot more differently. A corrupt individual is not like a burglar. Many corrupt activities are covered and camouflaged in contracts which appear legal on their face. So in one short, sharp answer to your question, it is not easy, but it requires political will. It requires a public that is clear, that individuals will be ostracized, and laws that will be applied. Africa has no shortage of good laws. In Africa, we have all the laws we need except one law, the law that says that we should obey the other laws.
But then we can't do this in Africa.
This can be done, and already something is being done. Of course, we talk about the negative side because the countries that are moving in the right direction are few and far between. But we have seen, as I said at the beginning, we have seen what is happening in Tanzania, which is in the right direction. What is happening in Namibia, that is in the right direction. We have seen what is happening in South Africa against the South African president, that is also in the right direction. We have seen what is happening in Rwanda, that is also in the right direction. I've seen what is happening here in Nigeria. Is not going to be easy, but there is a movement in the right direction. In other words, one can begin to see a groundswell of discontentment amongst the population, and the political class is beginning to act. But as I said at the beginning, it is not going to be easy. It can even be dangerous. But the unanimity with which we approach this particular issue is what will determine how effective our fight against corruption is. But it must be remembered that corruption undermines democracy, corruption is a threat to security, and if we don't deal with it, it will deal with us.
Very interesting perspectives from Professor Patrice Lumumba, the former Director, Anti-Corruption Commission in Kenya, is the Director, Kenyan School of Law. We appreciate your comment on this morning, Prof.
Thank you very much.
But we will be back in just a moment. Join us again.